There is an epidemic of loneliness right now. And loneliness, it's not just a personal problem, it's a productivity problem. And the reality is humans need connection, and work is one of the primary places they get it. And AI can't replace that. AI can't substitute that.
Is it making your job as executive recruiting harder or easier right now in terms of making wiser decisions, finding those right executives for your clients?
We've looked at this and said, there may be ways that we're able to use AI to become much more efficient in the ability to get to relationship, but it won't replace relationship.
Earlier, you talked about this fear people have of if I lean into it, it might replace my job or it might make me irrelevant. I don't think people have an option. My encouragement would be to anyone that's not engaging and not learning and not experimenting today with AI, you've got to start. Like, you're already behind.
I think most people ahead of the curve believe that the path we're on is that, but it is going to create new jobs. And so it's just going to require us upskilling, reskilling, but it's still terrifying for a lot of people. Joining me in this episode are Michael Morgan, the Managing Director, and Scott Himes, the Vice President of Talent Delivery at Medallion Partners, an executive search advisory firm. Enjoy the conversation. You're listening to Working Forward, a future of work focused podcast from People Forward Network. These episodes pave the road ahead, helping us confidently step into the future as a leader who moves people forward. After all, the best way to predict the future is to create it. Let's go. This is going to be a blast today. I've got some friends here with me today, Michael Morgan and Scott Himes from Medallion Partners here in the Indianapolis area. And guys, I've been so excited for this episode because we are going to be talking all about your expertise on executive search, talent acquisition. And I've got to tell you, I'm excited to learn from you today because it seems like we've got a lot to talk about and that a lot of things are changing in your industry. So I've got the easy part today. I'm just going to queue up a few questions, spin you guys up, and then let you go. Just let you spill all of your wisdom and expertise. You don't have to give all the trade secrets away, but maybe one or two with us today and our listeners. But it really is a fascinating topic. And so as we get ready to hop into this, just catch me up a little bit in terms of some of the stuff that you're seeing that's going on in your world when it comes to executive search. Michael, let's start with you, and then Scott, we'll come over to you.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Jason. Thank you first for having us on, and excited to be able to do this. And boy, if there was a word for the year, I think uncertainty seems to be it. We keep hearing, and it seems to be a theme that's going to continue. And I would say for an executive getting hired today, it looks very different than what it used to. And so technology, trends in the marketplace, uncertainty across global socioeconomic levels, there's a whole lot of things that are shifting. And so we feel like it's a very different time, and that means that we have to be a different support system to be able to make sure that companies are making wise decisions.
I think, Jason, what I'd add is, what worked 10 years ago doesn't work now, right? That's true for candidates. It's true for hiring teams. It's true for organizations. It's true for executives that are leading organizations. I think the pace of change is, we've always had change, but the pace of change is happening faster now than it has ever before. And not only is change happening, but it's disruptive change, right? It's change that's totally upending previous thought patterns and how we did business and how we looked at the world. And, sometimes it's happening in days and weeks, things are just different. And I think one of the common things I've seen this year is uncertainty creates fear. And a lot of fear causes people in business to just not act, right? They're not necessarily canceling projects and pulling back. They're just pausing and waiting to see what happens. And that creates a lot of disruption across the board.
Both of you say, like, from if you're the one that's an executive looking for that next opportunity in your career, that there's uncertainty on that side, but also on the employer side. Let's start with the employer side first. If you were to boil it down to, here's the number one thing in your seats at Medallion Partners that you're hearing in the work that you're doing, what is the number one concern from your partners that are looking for those next executives that's changing, that's dealing with the uncertainty, that's just making them a little bit more uncertain in terms of how they were looking 5 to 10 years ago? Can you boil it down to one thing that you're saying that's kind of got them on end?
Yeah, I don't know if I want to try and simplify it all the way down to one thing, but at the end of the day, the stakes are just going up. And so there's pressure. There's real felt pressure right now across whether that's HR, whether that's from the executive team, even the board level of we can't miss. We can't miss on talent because of what we've been through, where we want to go. This is this criticality of moment to be able to hit. So the biggest thing I think that they're looking for is certainty. They're trying to grasp on how do we make sure we get this right? I think that's where you step in to say, what does that mean to get it right, to have a plan at the beginning and a support at the end that ensures that this isn't a guessing game?
Yeah, I think, Jason, I'd add, we are still dealing with after effects of COVID, right? There is a talent crisis that's happening right now. The workforce has been upended, right? Employee engagement's down. People are sitting out of the workforce, and people aren't sure why or how do we engage those people and bring them back in. We have, there's a silver tsunami happening, and the silver tsunami isn't coming. It's here now, and it's present. I think last year I heard over 4 million people turned 65 and retired, right? 4 million people out of a workforce of 150-ish. That's a big number. And it's the challenge is there's not a pipeline of qualified leaders behind them. And I think that idea of succession is probably one of the biggest things we deal with across the board, whether if it's a privately owned large agricultural company or if it's a commercial bank here in the Midwest, right? There's just not enough mid-career advancing into senior career leaders. And we're losing a bunch of them really quickly.
I love the silver tsunami. That's the first I've heard that. The silver tsunami. I'm going to have to use that with some of the executives I know that fit that and be like, how does it feel to be part of the silver tsunami that's about to leave?
It's a real thing. And I think there's a part of this. I mean, a quick story or anecdote to this. Working with a company where they've been around 60 years, they've established themselves as a multi-billion-dollar player in their industry. And they stand now at a place where you build these 5-year strategic plans and you go through what is the next 5 years going to require of us. It's change. There's a lot of change, whether that's from a technology or operations, whether that's commercial scale or globalization, supply chain. All of these things are going to have to be addressed differently. But then you look at your 1, 2, 3 layers down in the organization and you think, well, we've got wonderful people to help address this. And as a part of that, we're probably expecting over the next 5 years inside the strategic plan, at least a third of those are going to end up either not a part of the company because they're retiring or moving on or looking to be promoted. That means you've got 30% of your leadership now that has built this plan that's not going to be here to help execute that. And what oftentimes happens is, well, how do we just backfill? Let's just get somebody in place, not ensuring that, this has to be leveled with the strategic plan where we're going. Somebody that already understands what technology is going to affect our business or how we're going to address different supply chain issues differently than we have before. Those are the kinds of things that catch executive teams flat-footed. And that's because we're so focused on getting done the things we need to get done, we lose sight of the fact that most likely there's going to be a third of the team not here when it's the most critical point of executing. Building that now becomes the issue. That has to be a part of a plan that, when you're one of these 60-year-old companies with amazing legacies, you have to have thoughtful planning because you can't just bring somebody from the outside and hope it works. And
so, Michael, with that, before Scott, we come over to you for your comments on that too. Probably what a lot of the listeners are wondering is then how do I make sure I get that hire right? If we're saying that the ability to lead and adapt through change is that consistent thing now that has really become super important in terms of a quality of leadership, are there certain assessment tools, simulations, certain things that you're looking for as an expert in this space that are signals of like, okay, this executive, they've got the stuff, they've got the ingredients around this that's really going to help this organization? Are there certain things that you're looking at right now that help you find those signals?
Yeah, to paint a picture that I think is really common that I see is you've got a company built on tremendous legacy, wonderful product or service to the market that you've done over time. That's created historical stability. Now what you're going to try and do is go to a new place. That requires the existing team to move and change and adapt, but it also means bringing talent in that's different. That culturally can be very difficult to be able to ensure, well, somebody that comes from a different background, boy, they don't talk or act, or they do things different. They're used to different systems or processes. We're asking them to bring the new to us, but we expect them just to fit in automatically. And I know we all want a magic bullet that says, oh, you take this assessment or this thing and automatically we know they fit. My counter argument to that is, do you really want them to fit in? I think what you really need is them to help you change. And that means us all adapting to the new thing. It's creating a new way. So before I say there's one assessment or tool that helps, more than anything, it's aligning the team to say, where are we going? And that requires the historical stability to move. And then the new people that we're bringing them to join as well. It creates a brand new thing, culture, structure, vision, not trying to get them to come in and make sure we get it right to fit into us. That's hard because, we have habits. We have things we've built over time that we're really proud of. It doesn't mean getting rid of legacy, but it does mean adapting to that. And in 2025, there's no choice. There's not a choice of whether we should adapt or not. It's whether you can, and you have to be able to do it. To say that means then you need a really good plan. You have to have a really clear vision, a really clear strategy, and the structure of your company has to follow that strategy. That makes sure that everybody is doing the right thing to go to the new place versus digging their heels in to kind of keep doing the old thing and hope we find somebody that magically has these brand new skill sets and tools we need, but also looks and acts and comes from places just like we do. Make sense?
It sure does. Scott, it looks like you want to add on to that too, man. I can see you're ready.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, this idea of secession, most organizations aren't talking about it at all. So I would say you got to start the conversation. One of the ways we talk about this or help organizations prepare in some of the strategic planning we do is we talk about, what's the way, right? For People Forward Network, what's the PFN way? Right. And this is so much more than just, hey, what are the values that are posted on the wall or what's the mission statement? But it's, how do you act? How do people show up when the owner or the manager isn't there? How do we treat our clients? How do we treat our employees? How do we engage with them? Just what's our way of operating? What's our rules of engagement? Is another way we talk about it. And because if you don't have that defined, and if people inside the organization today don't know what that looks like, then how can you possibly go out and hire your next senior leader or hire other, external talent or promote someone internally unless they have the DNA of the organization. So this idea, this exercise of developing the way for your organization, we found to be really helpful.
Eye on the wall at People Forward Network, because that literally is the name of our vision document, is the way.
Okay.
Our process. It's a 2-page document. Page 1 is the vision. Page 2 is activation. And so that's where a lot of the OKRs live. But it's literally called the way. So when you said you got to have a way, I'm like, absolutely you do. But it's also not a guarantee for success. You got to absolutely, make sure that you're wired to have people on the team for change, to be able to adapt through change, to lead through change. To Michael's point too, of making sure you know where you're headed, but also making sure that you're able to unlearn, rewire, pivot when needed, because the market shifts are happening at a much larger magnitude and they're happening faster than we ever experienced before. And that's a good call. The thing that you shared, Scott, there that just really, if once we see the replay and you see the look on my face when you said this, I was like this. And it was that most organizations still aren't doing succession planning. That floors me. Okay, dig into that more for me. Why is that the case? I
think the stat I heard was less than 25% of privately held businesses have a succession plan, right? So, and I think it is, you have the tyranny of the urgent, right? I mean, it's just the day-to-day demands of a business can be overwhelming, and just trying to stay afloat and trying to keep things moving forward, to pull yourself away, to do strategic planning, to think about the future in that way is really challenging. And most people don't like to think about when I'm gone, right? Or it seems so far out there that there's plenty of time to deal with that in the future. And I think it's just irresponsible. I mean, it's irresponsible of boards to allow an executive team or to allow a CEO not to have a succession plan that they're actively working through. I think it's negligent to not be developing a pipeline internally, so you have talent and that's ready to step up and ready to go. I mean, one of the ways you can measure your managers at all levels is, are they training someone up to replace them? It's a basic question.
And I'll add to that too. And I think oftentimes when we think about succession planning, we think about the CEO. What happens if that person moves on? We need to make sure we can have somebody else at the ready. But if you think about every function across your business that you have, there is risk across all of that. There is development. What we often find is that boards will look at this and say, we've got great talent internally. Somebody will be ready. Well, at the pace of change and things that are happening, and then you add dynamics and the internal politics of everything that ends up happening, and then you get to a place to say, boy, we're going to need a new CFO in the end of a year because so-and-so is going to retire or move on. And then they look at the next person and they go, ooh, are they ready? I'm not sure. It's totally reactionary. You thought you had it, but you took for granted because you never heard any problems, so we assumed. What we didn't have was a development plan in place for the people underneath the CFO that said, what are the things that maybe you haven't had experiences in? Or how do we help you when it comes to managing up and, you know, dealing with boards or executive teams or things like that you just may have not had exposure to? All of that is things that, again, the tyranny of the now and the urgent gets in the way of it. But if you don't make space for it now, it's going to come find you later. And then it's purely reactionary and you're making a decision out of a place of scarcity, not out of a place of abundance.
The psychology behind it makes so much sense. I mean, none of us want to be like training our replacement to a certain extent, right? To be like, okay, there's a finality to this. Let me give you all of my wisdom so that I can be replaced. And if you think about it on a certain level too, I mean, right now we're just talking about humans. We're going to be getting into AI here pretty soon. But that's the other thing that's kind of going over people's heads, I think, that's creating all this fear, is this fear of the more that I lean into AI, are we speeding up with the likelihood rather, of it eventually displacing the work that I know. And I think most people ahead of the curve, you know, believe that the path we're on is that, but it is going to create new jobs. And so it's just going to require us upskilling, reskilling, learning how to do different types of work, maybe where we're at, and kind of things. But it's still terrifying for a lot of people. And to know that folks are already experiencing some of that when it comes to succession planning of like, I want to put this off. I don't want to think in terms of me not doing what I've always done. I think on so many levels is so true, but it's also one of those, we've got to put our big boy and big girl pants on, because if we thought we've already been through a lot of change, now we all are in that process because of how much AI is integrated and will continue to move from more of like the generative aspects of what we've done, which is augmentative in work. We are in a path where it's going to be automated, more automated, where it is working autonomously on certain types of roles or different types of work functions. And so that concept of succession planning and why there's so much fear around it makes so much sense. Before we move on from succession planning a little bit, what are some of the other things that you're seeing and hearing around succession planning specifically that are either some warning signs or maybe some optimistic signals of like, okay, we're starting to turn the corner here in doing a better job with succession planning?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I think conversations like this are happening more often, right? They're still not happening enough. And I think as we engage boards and you know, this idea of, you know, build versus buy talent, right? Which is kind of a crass way of saying it, but do we develop and build our talent internally? Are we looking externally? I think is a conversation that's happening more, and it's not either or, it's both and, right? And I think
okay.
I just think the reality of what we've been through as a people, as humans over the last 5 years, is it's making people realize like there's a lot of uncertainty, things change fast, nothing's for certain, and we got to be ready for it. And so I think compared to maybe 8 years ago before COVID, like it's more a topic of conversation now than it has been.
Yeah, I think, you know, now, however long into this podcast, what you haven't heard us talk about is how do you go find people, and what about their resume, and you know, looking into what I'll call the actual search of something and finding a person. Because I think the future and where we're at right now, the pain points, it's not how do we find them, it's how do we make wise decisions. And so if there's a point of emphasis when we think about succession, it's the idea of, can you as a leadership team have a framework for making good decisions? Whether that's the internal development of talent, the external search of talent, what are you going to need and when are you going to need it? You won't always have everything certain, But if you can have a framework for making good decisions, that's the step forward in the right direction. Being proactive versus reactive makes all the difference.
That's so wise. I've heard some future strategists say that just because AI can do something doesn't mean that it should. In other words, that a lot of organizations need to be using a lot of wisdom in terms of what the plan is for how they're going to use it. And you just kind of touched on that, Michael, that just because AI helps us do things faster and it's easily accessible doesn't necessarily mean that it helps us be more accurate or make a wiser decision. I think it can if we're wise about how we use it, but I'll be honest, most of what I see around AI use is all about speed. And it's like, oh, great, just ran this copy. Let me take this, let me run, and that's going to be our next marketing campaign or whatever. I'm not saying everybody does that, but I'm saying I see a lot of that where I love the speed of just being able to give it a basic prompt. It's going to give me this, great, this looks good. And it makes me concerned sometimes. And Microsoft even acknowledged this. They've got research on it so far that people are self-reporting that their critical thinking skills are diminishing because they're just because of the speed of AI and ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini of being able to get a response and then taking and running with it without taking the time to pause and think deeply on it, to be able to have discernment, to make those wise decisions. And in the type of work that you're doing with clients, when you're talking about senior level executive leadership, I'm sure that's just become more of a talking point in your conversations with partners of like, yes, we may lean into using some AI for some things, but at the end of the day, we've got to make wise decisions, not always necessarily fast ones. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I think if you were to look as a public company shareholder, there's a part of this that's confidence and risk and trust. And what a shareholder wants in the marketplace is to trust that this is something that's growing and stable. And right now, if you said, well, we're going to use AI and replace that with our head of manufacturing and operations, I think you'd have a whole lot of shareholders going, wait a minute. We still want a person. We trust people, right? And look, AI and technology, it's going to speed up and fast, and it's going to help improve. And who knows what the future will hold there. But for now, we trust people. And we trust people because of the decision-making and the wisdom differently than fact, right? And just because you have a fact doesn't mean it's wise. And I think there's discernment, I think is a great word, Jason, to be able to use in that.
I think Jason, we're kind of, it's the wild, wild west right now in AI, right? People are still exploring it, trying to understand how to use it. I love, when you're talking about they're just pulling copy and throwing it out there. I mean, you can tell on LinkedIn when someone directly copied their ChatGPT output and pasted it with all the emojis and the bold and everything. And I mean, it's just very plain and it lacks personality. It lacks the emotion. And so people are experimenting with it. They're learning how to use it. Earlier, you talked about this fear people have of if I lean into it, it might replace my job or it might make me irrelevant. I don't think people have an option, right? AI is here. It's changing the job place. It's changing work as we know it. Work is going to look radically different 5 years from now than it does today. Everyone's jobs are going to be impacted. I think what's most interesting about this technology with generative AI is in the past, it's been the lower level. You think about the Industrial Revolution or the printing press or agricultural advancements. It's been those lower level roles. If you think about the talent pyramid, right? It's those lower level ones that have been impacted most. I think what we're seeing with AI is it's actually more middle management that's starting to be impacted the most. And I know Microsoft just did some layoffs recently, and it was kind of that middle management. And it's like, do we really need all this kind of mid-tier people if our lower level people are that much more efficient, more productive, more intelligent because of generative AI? And so I think my encouragement would be to anyone that's not engaging and not learning and not experimenting today with AI, you've got to start. Like, you're already behind. And not doing it isn't going to protect your job. It's not going to protect your career. Like, you've got to become the AI expert in your office. Like, be the one others come to ask questions, because the train's already left the station and you've got to get on.
You got to get the hands dirty.
Yeah,
that's exactly right. I'll tell you the going back to the discernment thing. Currently where we are, we even have a lot of CEOs of Fortune 500 companies that are kind of all over the board in terms of AI strategy and philosophy within their organizations. Duolingo's CEO just recently said, we will not be hiring human talent until we can prove first that it can't be done by AI. Then we would consider hiring a human for it. You just referenced Microsoft, the 3% layoffs of the human talent that equated to around 6,000 team members. But then we got Klarna. I don't know if you remember Klarna or not. Klarna has made the news a lot because, unfortunately, this is just kind of a sign of the times economically. Klarna is the company that, like, if you order Uber Eats, where instead of paying for your full order, because it's like $50 for Taco Bell, if you get like some nachos Bel Grande, don't be mad at me, Taco Bell, but that you can use Klarna to pay as you go so that you can pay for your Taco Bell in payments, right? That company took a very bold stance of very similar to Duolingo of like, okay, we're going to do away with our entire customer support team and it's going to be all AI chatbots. They reversed that. It was an unmitigated disaster. I believe the number, it was either 40 million or 40 billion in terms of estimated cost of what they lost. And so their board and executive leadership were like, we've got to turn this around. We're bringing back our human talent to be doing the customer support. And so it's one of those, I think, because it is developing so quickly, I think sometimes we have a tendency to match our pace of like, oh yeah, let me go. I'm going to use it for this, and this. And some of that in terms of your individual work, I think is okay. But philosophically, as a whole organization, in terms of that discernment piece of what are we going to use it for, what aren't we, I think sometimes it's good for us to pause and think well and deep, even though we're equipped with things that can help us go faster. Doesn't necessarily always mean that we should, because of what we see from senior leaders just over the last few months in terms of making decisions and doing an about face and being like, oops, that was a big mistake. Can y'all come back and work for us now?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of statements and a lot of noise in the market right now. Some want to be seen as the early adopter. It's a marketing tactic to say we're bleeding edge, and so our adoption is going to be really fast and early on this because that's the kind of company we want to be seen as. That's taking a risk, right? And risks can pay off. We've seen early adoptive companies that have done incredibly well because they were first to market on a lot of things. Other side of this, we have those that are sticking their head in the sand and just saying, we don't want to deal with it. Both as individuals as well as companies, I don't think that's the solve either, right? What Scott was saying is you don't have a choice. So it's coming. But I think you're right in that deciphering what is hype versus what is good change management in a company. You're trying to move an enterprise. That's not something that, unless you're a 5-person or 10-person company, that you can just switch, right? The analogy of the bigger the company gets, it turns into a battleship, not a jet ski. And so to turn a battleship, and maybe these mid-market companies, right, you see as something in between, it still takes good change management skill sets, which has process involved and planning involved, communication and rollouts, the kinds of things that you want to do that make sure this is durable. Because what you don't want is the rejection of it, like what you see with some of these companies that are early adopt, they get in, they're doing it, and all of a sudden there's either a customer rejection, an employee rejection, or flat out the tech isn't ready yet. Now you're falling through, right? And now what your promise to the customer is now fallen off, and you lose trust. And so, I think we're still in a process of this. My big, label on the AI thing for a team and an organization leading, or a team leading an organization is really around good change management fundamentals don't change. They're still there. Technology's moving really fast. You got to make sure people come with it. Otherwise, you're going to see chaos.
Yeah. We just did a training with a top 40 financial firm, their executive team on AI. It was kind of a lunch and learn, and because you think about professional services, they're wrestling with this a lot, right? I mean, how do we, if we're more productive, how does that change our pricing model? For example, right? Do our clients require? Do they want us to use AI? And what the surveys are finding is, clients are actually expecting you to use AI. But do you have to reveal that, right? Do you have to share when you use AI and how you've used it? And so there's all these questions happening. I think where I see it right now, kind of the current state of it, is it's additive, right? So it's not really replacing much right now. It's not really replacing current things being done. Maybe they're being done slightly more efficiently. What's really happening though is all of the small things that organizations aren't doing, teams aren't getting to, you don't have time for, like AI is coming in and allowing people and organizations to now take those on and do those small additive things that they weren't able to do a year or 2 years ago. And so, but still lots of learning, lots of exploring, which is okay. But be exploring. Don't be sitting on the sideline.
Yeah. So this is fascinating. You just brought up disclosure that now you're working with a client where like you have to disclose because their customers are expecting and wanting them to be using AI, and that there's some kind of a disclosure of like letting them know when it's being used. Did I hear you correctly?
Well, that's the question, right? Should you? Right?
Should you? I see.
There's not a contractual obligation or there's not a legal obligation right now. But you think about it in financial services, if you're preparing financial statements or you're helping or you're auditing or in legal situations. I mean, like what responsibilities do we have as stewards of working with our clients of disclosing when and how we're using it, if any? Maybe we don't.
So that's absolutely fascinating. I don't want to get us too far down that rabbit hole, but I hadn't thought about that before, that if you start heading that direction, and particularly if you are a consulting group, if you're professional services, you're providing advice and very strong opinions, that if AI is helping guide those opinions, with clients, that there would have to be some kind of an acknowledgement or disclosure of some kind, potentially, of saying, hey, our recommendation, yes, it's coming from us, but we did use AI as part of this to do some of the background research of pulling together, an analysis or summary of the case studies that are out there around this particular thing. I hadn't thought about that before, but that's fascinating.
Yeah, it's there's a story. I think it was last year. There was a lawyer that actually used AI to put together his argument for trial.
How'd that go?
Not well, right? Because one of the challenges with AI is, now it's getting a little bit better. It's actually a lot better, but hallucinations happen, right? Where it will quote a statistic or it will share even a source that's not real or not valid or inaccurate, and I think sometimes it does that to try and please us, right? That's how they're trained, and he got called out. The judge called him out.
Wow.
And he was, he obviously lost the case. But so I think we're still in this place where as it gets used, like we've still got to be really careful with it. Like check your sources, check the stats, make sure what you're getting is real and valid. It still requires the human brain, like Michael was saying. Like it can't exist without humans right now.
Yeah. Is it making your job as executive recruiting, is it making your job harder or easier right now in terms of making wiser decisions, finding those right executives for your clients?
Yeah, I think there's maybe a theme that we've begun adopting here, at least as our firm in Medallion, is high tech and high touch. And what I mean is that we've looked at this and said, there may be ways that we're able to use AI to become much more efficient in the ability to get to relationship, but it won't replace relationship. At the end of the day, we're trying to help. I mean, we look at this at an executive level of trying to fit talent into with companies at a leadership level. It's almost like an acquisition of companies in some ways, because you're bringing full skill sets, matching with another company, and there's diligence involved and all of that. That has to be done in relationship. But there's also a whole lot of things going on around that we can utilize technology to do. And so we're not going to be standing here and using the phone book to try and call people and see if they're open to a job. That would be irrational and sticking our head in the sand. But we're also not going to just try and automate this to say, hey, look, we put out a thing and filled out and we've never had to talk to a human and now we've got somebody hired. I'm not sure that enables the ability for relationships. What I predict that's going to happen, especially at leadership levels, is what will begin to be prioritized more and more and more is human trust and interaction. Because there's going to be uncertainty of like, well, I read this online. I don't know if that was real or if that was generative. I just don't know. And there's all the, marketing. There's going to be all the commercial things and the noise in the marketplace. I don't know. Did he really do that job on his resume, or did he just plug that into ChatGPT and it popped out and said he did? I don't know. So what we're going to do is we're going to need face-to-face people interaction to make sure that's high touch, right? Being face-to-face. And if that means getting on a plane and sitting down over lunch with somebody, that value skyrockets when you have to compare it against, well,
all I've got is a brief and an overview of their background, and I hope that it's right. I just don't know, right? And so this is where I think as a company when we get into recruiting or talent development, use technology for a lot of the efficiency that you can gain, but add a higher touch of real face-to-face relationships, because that'll never be replaced.
Yeah, Jason, I think a lot of it depends on where you're at in the talent pyramid, right? Where we specialize, and what Michael's talking about is, you think that mid-level and above, so director and above, right, is where we play a lot. AI, it's helping some with some efficiencies, but it's not really in a consequential way inserting itself into the process today, because it's very personalized, it's very high touch, it's very individualized. Where you are seeing a lot of it today, and there's a lot of technology that's being rolled out monthly, is at that lower level, higher volume space, right? And so where you're trying to hire, I think it was UPS or FedEx, or maybe both of them, this past holiday season, they were hiring thousands of people without a human being involved, right? Everything from application, resume submission, analysis, are they a fit, are they not a fit, following up with them, getting them an employee agreement, getting them to accept an offer, and then setting up an onboarding time to show up, like all of that automated. And we're seeing a lot of that in kind of low to mid-level roles, where they're using AI to analyze resumes. They're using AI to even start to interview candidates, right? You have an AI agent that calls you or reaches out to you when it's convenient for you. I mean, a lot of candidates like it because they don't have to do it during the workday. They can do it in the middle of the night if they want. And they're collecting basic information, sharing information about the roles and the opportunities, and then getting them to a stage to where they start to interact with a human. So lots of AI and technology happening at those levels, which is needed, right? When you post a position and you get 1,000 applications, like, how can a human go through all that? They can't. And so you need technology, you need AI. But at the level we operate at, it's still very, very minimal because it's so human and high touch.
I'll maybe even give it a quick story on where I think this comes together for us when it comes to hiring talent. When you think about hiring somebody that has to relocate, right? They're going to pack up their family and they're going to move across country to take a job. This is a new job for them in a brand new company and brand new surroundings. They may have a spouse and children. They've got real estate and doctors and specialists and grocery stores, and little Johnny has soccer and Susie has a pet snake, and all of these things you've got to take care of. There is so much technology that enables. We actually have a whole 1-year program post-hire when a leader comes in to make sure that they establish roots in their community to help, because the stress level of relocating for a job adds so much stress to the family that has nothing to do with the actual work. Well, if we ignore the work, we're ignoring the human. Or I'm sorry, if we ignore life outside of work. So we have to be able to do this. We created this program. But what technology allows us to do is we're helping them find what housing is available, what doctor's offices there, what kind of schools are they interested in going to. Here's all the soccer programs, and here's a veterinarian for your pet snake. All of these things we can help to get them very quickly and early on to do that. But instead of just leaving them and then sending them an email and checking in on them every month or two, which may or may not be a human, it could be totally automated, what we're doing is actually calling and reaching out, and we're sending them tickets to the local theater or a fair or something and saying, how's it going at school for your 13-year-old? That conversation creates a depth of, I'm loving this job, I'm loving the people, but my daughter's really struggling at school. And I have been late 3 or 4 times. I've had to miss meetings at work because we're having to help here. Well, all of that the company is not seeing, but our ability to create a relationship, technology fuels that but doesn't replace it. That intimacy that's created there creates such a value for companies to go, well, how do we help support that? Well, having some empathy and providing resource to help and all of those things they want to do as a company, because you want to see your people succeed, but wouldn't have known that if it was an automated email coming through. Human relationship is what actually creates the depth that helps change, right? So that leaders are successful differently than just, again, being hired off of an AI chat.
That's so powerful. And in that example that you just shared, Michael, I mean, I can't help but think even the best organizations, I mean, you work with incredible clients and partners, even the best organizations, like they probably don't have visibility where that person is like raising their hand saying, hey, I need to tell you about stuff going on with my, because they just got hired. They don't want to be like, can I share with you the stuff that's not going well so far? That's a stroke. They're trying to put their best foot forward and not create any ripples because they just got there. When they have a partner like you, where that human touch and that trust has been established, where they can be like, yeah, it's going great, but let me be real with you in terms of one of the challenges that's going on that's making it a little bit harder. Having you as that partner that helps mediate and support and nurture and encourage those things that many times kind of is if the iceberg's in the water, it's the stuff underneath the water that the employer can't see. That you can come in and support those things and then provide a human response to it. That's absolutely incredible. It makes me think of kind of a journey we've been on at People Forward Network as well. We launched our community in January, and it's a community of People Forward leaders. And I'll tell you, the number one thing that we heard as to why leaders were excited to join this community and they wanted to make sure before they signed up was, hey, this is going to be different from LinkedIn, isn't it? We're like, yeah, but by the way, tell us, what does that mean to you? Because we know what it means to us, but what does that mean to you? What they were talking about is they're tired of the algorithms. They're tired of people sliding into their DMs, trying to sell them stuff. It seemed like so much of the stuff that LinkedIn was originally built on of being able to build and find authentic relationships, that it's become more challenging to be able to do that. And this isn't becoming a LinkedIn discussion, but bringing it back to the PFN community. The reason we're hearing from leaders is they said, we want to be in a community where we know bots, algorithms, machine, like all this type of stuff isn't good. It's about real human connection, really getting to and trusting that the content you see on there, you know that 100% of it is generated by people. It's them. Even if it's messy, even if it's not worded perfectly, they want to know that when they go there, that they're not going to have people that all of a sudden are just trying to pitch them or sell them on things. But they want a place where they can build those trusted, vetted relationships, walk alongside other leaders that care about culture, that care about employee experience, and those kind of things. And that was a signal that we were seeing too. And I just think, after hearing you and Scott, is this is just going to continue to become even more important, that there's going to be vestiges of human touch and humanity, that even though we continue to advance technologically, that there's going to be this yearning, this desire for certain aspects of our experience, whether it be work and life, that we still want to be 100% human. And that it has to be, and it gets back to that question of just because AI can do something doesn't mean that it should. So all that to say, we've seen it on our side in our maturity of the company and trying to grow, is understanding that from a community standpoint, even though we have the tools to flip on some AI stuff inside the community, we're not really like chomping at the bit to try and do that because we're not hearing from our members that that's what they want. They like the 100% raw human connection and authenticity. And so we're trying our best to honor that.
Jason, I mean, you know this, right? There is an epidemic of loneliness right now in our world, right?
Yeah.
And people are hungering for human connection. I think COVID made that more pronounced, and it's still carrying on. But and loneliness it's not just a personal problem; it's a productivity problem, right? And so when there's a reason Gallup in their survey, in the Q12 engagement survey, one of the questions is, do you have a best friend at work? I mean, out of all the questions, when I first heard that, I was like, really? Like that impacts people's productivity? And the reality is humans need connection, and work is one of the primary places they get it, right? Because think about, once you're out of school, like, where do you connect with people regularly? There's not the local bar down the street. I mean, we're such a geographically dispersed population now. People have left religious institutions, and now, interestingly, Gen Z is going, especially Gen Z boys are going back to faith communities in numbers that other generations haven't. And I think it's because of that need of connection and being around other people like them. And so there's just this epidemic of loneliness that we've got to address. And this isn't just a human, like, touchy-feely problem. This is a productivity problem that impacts businesses and impacts how employees engage and do they show up. And there's a big discussion, which we don't necessarily have to get into, around, work from home versus remote versus hybrid, right? That impacts and is a part of all of this. But humans need connection. And AI can't replace that. AI can't substitute that. And so I love what PFN is doing with the community. And I've been in there. I've not participated maybe as much as I should. And you remind me of that, Jason. But I do see people engaging and talking with each other in a really authentic way, which is encouraging.
And I think I think about HR leaders right now and what they're looking at. And when I put through the lens of a talent acquisition and what they're looking for, I get still often large company HR leaders are saying, can we get good talent? Or can we get enough good resumes? And my response to that is, how do we care for them and measure their success a year after they've started? Because that's the community you've got to build. Now, finding quality talent, I realize, might feel hard. They're out there. I mean, we prove that every day. There's amazing talent, but we have to create the environment of community for them afterwards and support this idea of, well, if they've got a good resume, that they'll be a good employee and that they'll stick around. Loyalty has changed in the corporate structure. It is totally different than what it was 10 years ago about what does it mean to be loyal to your company? What can companies do, right, to retain talent? Community and purpose. These ideals are human, ultimately, individually and exclusively human. And we have to be able to provide that in a way that ensures that they're successful. More so than, boy, can we use AI to try and generate resumes and candidates? And again, in talent acquisition, I love that, and I think it will happen, and I'm excited to see where that goes. It'll never replace the ability to say, are we helping people find purpose?
So you're telling me what moves the needle is still purpose, culture, connection, engagement, all the, it's not going out and finding the shiny new tool or the new technology or a new business operation of some kind, that it's still this ability to connect human beings in meaningful ways around meaningful work. I love that.
Yep. Jason, this reminds me, we do some work with executive teams, helping them be more cohesive and perform at a higher level. And one of the favorite exercises or tools we use with them, we call it a leadership tree. And what we do is we draw a tree up on a board, and we challenge them to think about their fruits and the roots, right? The roots are who are the people that have poured into you, that have mentored you, that have coached you, that are responsible for you being where you're at today. And then the fruits are who are the people that you're pouring into, that you're mentoring, that you're coming alongside, that you're investing in. And then they spend some time individually reflecting and writing, names. And then they get up and they post the names up there. And then we ask them to tell some of the stories of who their roots are, people that have poured into them. And I will tell you, every time we do this in a room full of executives, right? These are successful mid to late career men and women. Every time we do this, someone gets to tears. Right, they start crying as they talk about just the impact someone had on them and how meaningful that was, and then how it's impacted them all these years later, and now how they're trying to do that for someone else. But what's that emotion come out of? It comes out of connection. It comes out of relationship, and as good as AI gets or technology, it's just not going to replace that.
From your perspective, do you think so? You brought up hybrid and remote. We kind of went through that, and we're still going through it. But do you feel like it is more challenging if you're working remotely to still feel that level of connection?
Well, I think there's a good, there's an analogy that I use a little bit when it comes to feedback. And the idea is there's feedback loops. I say something, you say something back. And there is both speed to that loop and there's color to that loop. The idea of when you're in a text, it can be pretty quick. Text back doesn't have a lot of color to it. Didn't see their face. I'm not sure what else they meant. Maybe the emoji helped a little bit. Email, you could write a whole lot. It may take you longer. It's slower. You can write a whole lot. But the speed and the color of a face-to-face feedback loop, it's still by far the most of seeing what somebody is thinking and feeling. And then the speed of having to then give that back to them. There's a speed to that comes. And now put that in a room of really smart professionals trying to accomplish really big problems and puzzles in their marketplace. When you can get speed and color into that room, there is a connection that can be had faster and broader with people than sitting in a room like this that's virtual, where, again, this is fantastic. That never existed 15 years ago. We never thought this could be.
I don't know what the next 15 years are, but where we are today still gives us the richest connection together. Now, what does that do for an HR policy, and what does that do for a company? I don't know, right? I think there's different kinds of work and different kinds of problems, different kinds of needs to solve that. But if what we're asking about is where's the strongest connection, it still hasn't been replaced. It's still human to human, face to face.
Yeah. I get a lot of people calling me that, I mean, we get a lot of people that call us looking for a job, right? I mean, they know what we do and the world we're in, and they're like, hey, I'm thinking about making a transition, or I want to make a transition. Now, we don't see this at the executive level a lot. At the executive level, it's probably still more in person, but, more mid-level. Sometimes people come to me and they're remote today, and they're wanting to find something. And what I tell them is keep your remote role you have, because there's not many of them out there. The trend we're seeing this across all of our client base is if companies that are fully remote are actually becoming hybrid companies, right? A couple of days in the office. And we see this publicly too. There's some big announcements of companies that said they were going to be remote first always, and now they're going back on that. Companies that were, 2 days in office hybrid are now 3 or 4 days in office. Some companies are going back to full-time on site. And so the power right now, the power dynamic is in favor of employers, of companies, and employees are having to be don't have the power that they had, a few years ago. And so it is, if you're a remote employee and you want to stay remote, there's certain industries that's more easily done than others, but it's just, unfortunately, and I don't fully agree with it, and I think a lot can happen remote, but it's just harder and harder to find something. Now, what I tell people early career, you need to get in the office, right? If you're in the first 10 years of your career, go be in the office as much as you can. I mean, there's been some studies that have shown that, millennials and Gen Zs that started remote, you fast forward their career 10 years later, they have not progressed as fast as their predecessors or those that came before them, 10 years ago, right? Those that have been remote the whole time and are now 30, they oftentimes are not as far along in their career as someone that, was 30 when they were 2010 and they were in the office the whole time. And you just miss not only the connection Michael talked about, but you miss all the inorganic coaching opportunities, the opportunities to listen to a coworker, take a phone call or work through a problem or a challenge, the spontaneous meeting that you have with your boss, the opportunity that shows up and they need someone to take it or to help with it. And you just happen to be in the right place at the right time, kind of serendipitous. And so I tell people, especially early career, as much as it is to just be comfortable and relaxed in a remote environment, go find somewhere where you get in the office as much as you can, because it's going to be best for you long term.
Yeah, I'll tag on to that too, with just early career professionals when it comes to presence in office or remote. It's not a fault of theirs that they came out of school or came into the workforce right when, a pandemic hits and all of a sudden everybody's trying to figure it out. And so not their fault. But one of the lingering things that I see is poor habits and poor work habits, because the ability to show up and do the work, it's like stepping on the court or the field in a game, and you kind of got to have your game face on in, sweatpants and a hoodie, with your camera off and getting to work when you want. Again, it's very comfortable, but you don't get the kind of training and involvement. You don't get better. You don't get the reps like you would if you were there and present and being there. And I think it can be difficult to not prioritize comfort, because comfort is something we all want. But I think what you'll find is growth comes on the other side of that. And it limits growth when we say, you know what, it's just easier. I don't like the commute, or I don't like that I have to sit in an office and it's stuffy and a lot of people are older than me and I don't connect in the same way or like the same music. I don't fault one bit, especially knowing that was how you kind of learn for the first several years. But now is the time to challenge yourself to say, you know what, there's probably another level that I can learn. And if I want to max myself, right, and if I wanted to grow to be the best kind of professional that I can, putting yourself in that situation is going to accelerate your ability to learn. But you kind of got to get into the mix of things and step on the field.
I love that. I love the ideation around it of like reps, right? Of like, there's this big push in schools now because we started to realize several years ago, like, oops, The whole hidden curriculum thing of like the whole social emotional learning, that's kind of a big piece. We haven't been addressing it. And all of a sudden we got people who don't know how to carry on a conversation. They can't provide eye contact if they're at a restaurant to a server to give their order, all kind of different stuff like that. Well, I spoke with someone, you may know him. He's here in the Indianapolis area. His name's Don Wettrick. Don is the founder of the Started Up Foundation. He was a Noblesville High School teacher, and he brought entrepreneurship classes to Noblesville High School. Became a global phenomenon. He's good friends now with like Gary Vee, Daniel Pink, a lot of big time movers and shakers that are innovators. The reason I'm sharing this is when I saw him a couple weeks ago, he was telling me that what's interesting is his whole business model was working with schools, right? Of schools showing an interest in, okay, we want to offer something for students to give them a little bit more ownership of them having to go out, of having to spin up business models, of having to engage with business leaders in the community kind of thing. But the fascinating thing he said that started to happen is businesses are interested now in his model. So it's not just the schools. And the businesses are saying, hey, if the school doesn't want to pay for it, we'll foot the bill to sponsor for these entrepreneurs. The reason they're doing that, guys, is because the business leaders are saying, we need these types of skills. We need critical thinkers. We need folks that have great problem-solving skills, that are great at jumping into a problem, working cohesively as a team, that have the smart social, emotional learning type skills of what it takes to be a successful entrepreneur. And I just thought, that's refreshing. To view like social, emotional learning, not just through, the traditional psychological lens of like, this is what it takes to be a good human, but also taking it to the next level of like, this is what it means when you think about and working toward that professional side of your life, of how you bring those skills over and how those are going to be so important in terms of how you adapt to change, how you deal with failure, how you innovate, how you work with people that have different opinions from you. And it just was refreshing for me to hear that it's not just him working with schools now, but now businesses in those communities are stepping up to the plate and saying, we want in on this too, because we see the need for it.
Yeah, I think, Jason, for young people, especially early career, a lot of the focus is on hard skills, right? It's learning the technology, it's learning the expertise. And I think sometimes what we've learned and what you're sharing there is we've missed those softer skills, those human skills. And I think what's really interesting is at the executive level where we work, that's kind of the focus too, because I think 15, 20 years ago, the focus when you were hiring an executive was find someone from the industry, find someone that has the exact expertise that can do the thing, whether it's operations or finances or accounting or whatever it might, marketing, whatever it might be, and the executional side of their job, make sure they can do that really well, and that's all that mattered. Today, that's not the case. We have a tool, we call it the Medallion Matrix, and I think it's the absolutely best way to evaluate talent at the executive level. And part of what it does is there's three components of it. One of them is the executional. So what are the hard skills? What's the expertise? What's the things in your job that come out of the job description that you need to do really well? That's a given. That's the easiest to evaluate. You can look at a resume, you can do some assessments and typically evaluate that. The next part of it is what we call leadership and cultural fit. This is the hardest part to evaluate, right? These are these skills you're talking about, right? That are you a really good team player? Are you driven? Are you humble, right? Do you have long-term growth potential? Are you a fit for the mission of the organization or the culture or the way, as we talked about earlier, of the organization, right? What type of leader are you? Are you a servant leader? Or are you, do you micromanage more? Like what type of leader? How do you approach that? And that's the hardest to evaluate. But those are the skills that are really differentiating and that boards are focusing on now in a world that is constantly changing and evolving. How adaptable are you? How agile are you? And that's part of what we really try to hone in on with the Matrix is these skills that aren't on a resume, that can't be answered in a test, right, in an evaluation. And that's really where I think the special sauce comes in finding executives that are a fit. And those skills matter just as much later in career as they do with the early career professionals that you're talking about.
That is so good. So you brought up the matrix. Now, listen, I'm not going to have you give away all your trade secrets here, but come on now. We got to dig into the matrix a little bit, right? We got to give the people what they want. So this matrix, can you kind of walk us through maybe what are some of the components of it? Is it like, are you doing interviews? Are you getting observational data? Are there simulations that you're running? Are there certain types of assessments? What are some of those ingredients that go into giving you the signals or data that you're looking for in that matrix?
Yeah, that's good. Well, I think, the first part of this is establishing what does the business need. And anytime you're evaluating talent, trying to evaluate them in a vacuum is all hypothetical until you get to this is the business and this is the issue we're trying to solve for, right? We're a company looking to scale. And over the next 5 years, we want to double by growing into global markets. Okay, now you have something to ground someone to help in evaluating, but not, again, just the hard skills. So understanding the business need first. And I think that's a piece that gets missed too often. We talk with, there's lots of big recruiting firms out there that love to throw your resumes and profiles. Will never understand your business, but understanding a unique scenario. Oh, by the way, the last person, was here for 35 years and was an absolute authoritarian where he held all the knowledge and never shared any of it. That's probably good to know. When you're evaluating talent, somebody's going to come into that scenario. They're going to have to navigate that. It doesn't matter how good they are at audit or supply chain or whatever. Their ability to navigate a change in a cultural dynamic means everything to their success. So the business need starts. The second thing, we call it creating a source of truth. Job descriptions only go so far, right? And they are so helpful in being able to share who is the company and what's important and what are the responsibilities and the scope and span. But things that it doesn't cover is how does somebody manage conflict? Or what's their ability to navigate ambiguity in creating a new process when everyone else hasn't had it before? What's their ability to train and mentor up-and-coming talent that have high potential? Okay, that stuff doesn't show up as a need in a job description ever, but often makes all the difference. And so that's where we create this matrix as a source of truth. And it has the executional hard skills that they're going to need, but then it also has this culture and leadership types dynamics that helps us to understand. Then there's the other part of how hard are they going to be to hire? If it's an internal candidate who's been interviewing in 5 different places and they're looking to leave, that may change the effect. If it's somebody external, what's their motivation to leave the company they're at? And why would they join our company versus somebody else? And where do they live and how much do they make and all these things? So we've actually created this as a tool that allows then what we do is in interviews and assessments and references and all the conversations we're having in and around hiring a new leader, we're able to measure each of these things individually. So that way it's not, hey, we think this person would do a good job. It's actually, hey, according to this source of truth, this person's going to excel at this, which is your most important factor. Their learning and development probably comes here. And to get them, it's probably going to take this, but we need to watch out for the risk with fill in the blank. That has a much more contextual view of an individual that helps them, again, when we talk about success a year after they've been in place. Are we going to engage them? Are we going to give them meaningful work? Are we going to bring loyalty because we've engaged them in a new, different kind of way that helps them grow versus, boy, we got a great resume. We hope it works, right? That's all the difference in why you create a matrix and why you align HR, why you align hiring managers, recruiters, interviewing teams. Everybody creates that, is moving around that matrix. So that way you've got a single source that everyone's using instead of using their own, like, I didn't like their handshake, or they asked me this weird question. Why did they ask about the other person who used to be in the role? Oh, because that was a big deal. And for them to be successful, that's not them being nosy. That's them helping ensure this is an environment that's fruitful for them.
That's so good. I got to ask, do you give bonus points to parents of kids? Because when you got to thrive in chaos, you got kids, right?
That's right. Operating in
we
chaos
all know that.
and uncertainty.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Like, if we're going to run a simulation, like, no, this person already has multiple kids. They've been operating in chaos for a long time. They got it.
It's how many kids, right? Is it 2-on-1, 2 parents, 1 kid? That's pretty
That's
easy.
right.
Is it man on man or zone defense, right?
You got to go to
that
zone
matters.
defense.
defense. I mean, that's just a whole new level. Jim Boeheim, Syracuse. I mean, that's a whole new level of expertise that you got to master there.
And
That's
Jason, you
right.
got toddlers, which means you're trying to pull them out of windows and off of hot stoves, and that's a whole nother level of chaos.
Oh,
When
it's
they're,
great. Here's the
yeah.
thing, though. I don't think I'm thriving through it. I think I'm kind of turning into the get off my lawn kind of guy. My wife was like, "You're kind of turning into a grump a little bit sometimes over there." I'm like, I'll work on that. Don't worry. But go into the kid thing. Because I think this is fascinating. Michael, you've got 4. Scott, you've got 3. I've got 4 kids. A lot of times on the show, I kind of filter things through the lens of like thinking about my kids. What's the future of work going to look like for them? What's it going to look like to go out and look for work for them? Because it's going to be very different from what we did. Do you ever think about the work that you do through those lenses of like when you're home with your kids of like thinking about what's it going to look like for them to look for jobs? What are the types of jobs that they're going to have? Or do they even come to you and start asking some of those questions? Put your dad hats on.
So Michael and I both have a senior that's graduating this week or next week from high school. So this is I think something
Congrats.
that's probably yeah, we made it. I think I don't know what's
I
next.
take no
but
credit.
We made it this
yeah,
far.
He did wonderfully. What a support system. I take no. Yeah, he did that in spite of me.
It's interesting. So I have a computer science background, right? And 5 years ago, programming would have been, I would have told my son, because he likes computers, he's analytical. I was like, go do software. Like it's a phenomenal career path. Today I wouldn't. All right. I was vibe coding an app for the first time last week. I made 2 apps. I didn't write a single line of code, and I did it in probably 10 hours at $25. Right. So the ability to do software, like, I don't know if we're going to need programmers in 5 years. And what I tell my son is, the job that you're going to get in 4 or 5 years, hopefully not 6, hopefully 4 or 5, when you're out of college, probably doesn't exist today, or it's going to look very different than it does today. And so the thing you specialize in, whether it's finance or engineering or computer programming, like that thing doesn't matter as much as the ability to learn, like figuring out how to work in teams, how to work with others, being adaptable, being flexible, all those skills Jason, you mentioned earlier with young entrepreneurs, like those softer skills, those are what really matter. And that's what you can get out of the college experience. And those, learning to work really hard, having a great work ethic, like that's what's going to lead to success 5 years from now, because I have no idea what job you're going to get. The job you may get probably doesn't even exist today. And that's okay. Like, let's focus on those other skills.
Yeah, I like that, Scott. I would echo the sentiment. I think another aspect for me is trying not to pressure. You got to go to this school and get this degree, and trying to put that on my boys, having 4 of them. Look, any parent wants their child to do better than they did and wants to see them at whatever the next precipice is. But I think for me, a lot of this has been around the understanding of, look, whether you want to turn screws or do finance or some be an astronaut, any of it becomes less important as how you do it. And the kind of person and character you develop into, to me, is going to make the difference. Because if you can learn to solve problems well, if you can learn to manage conflict, communicate with others who are very different than you, like these are the kinds of things we're also seeing in our society today that a lot of people are struggling with. These are the kinds of things that right now in this moment in society, what we're struggling with is we don't know. There's so much uncertainty. We go to our, what I'll call, disrupted self. And what I think is going to help is hopefully not taking all of that example that we're probably setting for our kids that maybe aren't the best reflection of what we want them to be as adults, and helping them to understand, we want you to be better than the way that what you're seeing right now. We want to be able to see that you can have meaningful dialogue and good, healthy conflict that brings care, and that also can solve really hard, ambiguous problems that may not have a certain outcome. But we enjoy the work of it, and we enjoy what that can be. And that can be an inspiring thing for good, not a scary thing that we have to get rid of or bash or isolate against. And I think those things are the future of work, even more than whatever the trade or the skill might be, because 15 years from now, I just don't know. I don't think any of us do, really.
That's a fascinating mindset shift. You think about it. So you guys are probably in the same generation I am, or close to it. Not that I'm making judgments here, but I'm just saying, generally speaking, we're all handsome guys, probably in our mid-40s. Um, Gen Xers, millennials, or maybe that blending generation between the two of Zennials is where we're at. Your experience, if it was similar to mine, was the question you were often peppered with as you were an adolescent was, where are you going to be when you grow up? And in the school I grew up in, I'm from Logansport, Indiana, so north central Indiana. It was basically, yeah, you're going to college. You'll figure it out. Just go get a degree. Like that was your path. And what's really fascinating is I'm starting to see a lot more leaders kind of around this concept. And I want both of your feedback on this, especially as dads, is like I've heard Gary Vee say, don't ask that question. The question you need to ask instead is, what are you curious about? What are the problems that you want to solve? And so I'm going to put this out there and say, I don't know if it works or not. I don't know if it's the panacea, if it's the solution. That's what I'm approaching my kids with. So we have friends of ours who also have kids, and they talk about, oh, so-and-so's going to end up going to IU or go to Purdue. And they're like, where do you think Duke goes? And they're like, I'm not necessarily going to push him to go to college. Like whatever he wants to do, whatever he's curious about. So I don't know. We're kind of running an experiment here, contrary to how my wife and I were raised. And my guess is probably how you guys were raised, at least in the schools that you were. With this paradigm shift, what are you seeing with your kids? Are you seeing that this, you think, is a better mindset and a better approach to thinking about work, is thinking around the curiosity and what problems you want to solve, as opposed to maybe the old mentality of, what do you want to be when you grow up? Any opinions on that?
I think one thing that's been interesting is watching my kids learn, especially as they've been teenagers, and how they learn, right? YouTube is a phenomenal teacher, right? They if there's a skill they want, if they want to learn to fix something, or whether it's software or it's something around the house, or it's my son with his car, that's where they go first, right? I think they've learned more from YouTube than they probably have from their high school, and that's just the reality. And so, in a world where knowledge is so accessible via video and YouTube or ChatGPT, or like it does bring the question up: what is the value of higher education, and is that different? Is that evolving? Is there going to be a different model, in the future than there has been in the past? And I think that the answer is absolutely yes. I don't know what that looks like yet. Right. I don't think we know. I know we work with some higher education institutes and some large ones, and they're wrestling with this, right? Their average prospective student is no longer a 17-year-old high school student. It's a 35-year-old mom that's working a job and wants to go back and get an education, but can't do a full master's program and wants to do a certificate. And so I think the model is changing. How that's looked for us as parents is, I think we've tried to remove the pressure, and I think Michael said this, of trying to fit into a mold. And like my son, for example, has decided totally out of the blue that he's going to do the National Guard. And so he's going to take 6 months and do his basic and his advanced training. None of us are military, like none of us have military backgrounds. This didn't come from us, and this was something he wanted to do. Like, great, go do that. And then, afterwards, I think he wants to go to college, but that may change. And so I think it's removing the pressure, but just making sure that they're doing something, that they're not being a bum at home, like learning. And if they're curious about something, encourage them to go pursue that. And then some of those other traits we talked about earlier, like as long as those are being developed, I don't worry too much.
Yeah, I've gotten to get involved with a couple of different nonprofit organizations that work around international education, international entrepreneurship. Some of the things in getting to look specifically South America and in Asia, some of their schools, they have an enormous amount of resistance just to finish, because their livelihoods and the struggles that they have in a developing country. We are incredibly fortunate that a very nice bus can come by our house, pick them up, take them with teachers and multiple teachers, all who have been certified and trained to do this, and send them back. Not that America's education is perfect or not stressed, but in comparison, they have lacked some resistance to do that. What I think then, in addition to that, is other models of education are very linear. You memorize facts. 2 + 2 is 4. And you have very much, I do this, then I do this, then I do this. So when you get onto the workforce, you hope that it follows this very linear memorizational kind of path. And what I think now, when we talk about what do we teach our kids about the future of work,
two things stick out to me. One is this idea of you are capable. Instilling and driving that into our children that you can do. We have lacked some resistance, and I think we're seeing some kids lack some grit and some ability to push through hard things, and then they lack confidence to make good decisions for themselves. They're hoping that it's handed to them, or they're waiting for things to happen because they're not sure, and if you're unsure, I don't have the confidence that I can figure it out on my own. So I think that's one thing that's really important, no matter what model of education, you are capable. And then the second thing is solve problems. Just find problems to solve, because I think it's not going to be memorization. It's not going to be linear. You're not going to join a job and they say, do this for 12 months, and then you do this for 12 months, and then another 12 months, and then you get this pay. The future of work isn't going to act like that. It's going to be so non-linear, so abstract. It's your ability to find problems and solve them. And I think if we teach our kids that you are capable and you have the confidence to do it, and then go find something and solve it, I think we're helping future-proof a bit, at least to find those that can be productive in doing these things. Otherwise, I'm afraid we end up, my fear keeps me up at night, are my kids sitting and waiting for a job to come to them, right? And they're like, just show me what to do, as a dad.
How much do I owe you, Michael, for that? That was like really good therapy there. Make them capable, like believe in their capability, and then solve problems. I love that. Back to that solve problems, going back to Don Wettrick and that Started Up Foundation, the motive, or I'm sorry, not the motive, the slogan for Started Up is see problems as opportunities. That's the core teaching of the entire curriculum. And I'm like, if there's one thing that can come away, and that dovetails perfectly with what you just said, is see those problems as opportunities. On the other side of them, like once we solve this, once we crack this nut, can you imagine what this is going to open up for us, what it's going to open up for communities, for society when you solve this, instead of being scared and being like, let somebody else do it. Like, get energized about those things that you can solve. I can't believe we're coming up on it. We got probably about another 15 or 20 minutes here, guys. You guys have been troopers hanging in there with me so far. But we've covered a lot so far. But what is something that you still want to cover that we haven't so far? Any particular topics coming to mind?
Yeah, I think so. So for me, what is a current executive facing right now? And leaders, I'm just going to use leaders in general. It's different. And being a leader in 2025 or 2026 and moving forward, it requires something different. And I think if I rewound to the last 5 years of what we've seen of leaders, first, the profile of a leader is somebody who wants the ball. They want to lead. They would like responsibility. They enjoy being in the middle of the action. So they're predisposed to go find problems and solve them, which we love about that. And then you send everyone home, and we then aren't sure, unprecedented times and all the things that we have to go through. The marketplace becomes then very uncertain. One, and the very first thing that leaders probably didn't predict was you had to make sure everyone was safe. Just safety in general became a thing. And then it was, okay, now we need to make sure that all of our people are being productive. How do we help them work? And a new workplace, is it from home or is it in an office? Where is it? But let's make sure it's productive. And then it's like, okay, how do we get them back and engage them again and help grow? And also, by the way, we also need you to now innovate because, we got all these supply chain backups and, and our companies need to fast forward financially. And so we need you to innovate. Oh, and by the way, we need some stability and predictability because now the market's going up. Speed this cycle up. Leaders are burning out at an incredible rate because they're having to face being in the thick of solving all these things of which nobody at school foretold them that, hey, when you grow up and you become this really wonderful leader of this company or function or community, that you're going to have to now care for all of this. And so what a leader faces now is a challenge. And what we talk about is, gosh, we wish we had better leaders, right, in our country, or boy, wish we had better leaders in this organization or that whatever. We like to do a lot of armchair quarterbacking. And I think there's a piece of this that I want to tune, which is, boy, we need to create developmental paths so that leaders can be sustained. There's a sustainability to leadership that requires it. Yes, they have to get better. Yes, they're asked to do more. Yes, we want them to aspire to these things that help create wonderful opportunities. But it also means we have to provide the environment as a company, as a support system, as HR, as the boards, all the governance structures around, to say, we've probably asked more of our leaders in the last 5 years than we ever imagined we would be. Moving forward, what do we do differently to get it right? So the next unprecedented thing, we're better people for it. Otherwise, my fear is we're going to see, and we're seeing it already, the turnover at executive levels are faster than it's ever been. Loyalty is lower because the enormity of stress and the burnout rate of the expectations aren't keeping up with the development and support that we're also providing them.
How important are those like CEO support group kind of things, like where you go together and you get with other CEOs? Is that a component of being able to have some exterior support beyond what you have directly at work to try and help you work through those things and mitigate the effects of burnout?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's lonely at the top, right? I mean, when you're a CEO, and when we have CEOs tell us this all the time, who do you talk to? Like, where is the safe space to connect? Because you can't talk to your team that reports to you. That's your C-suite, right? And your board. Like, how vulnerable can you really be with them? And so I think a lot of executives, and especially CEOs, feel lonely and need somewhere to connect. They need a community of people that they can connect with. And so if that's in one of these professional groups where they connect with other CEOs, if it's with an executive coach, we have a lot of we help connect a lot of executives with coaches. If it's in a community, in their local community or a faith community, or just somewhere, like, find some people that you can be real with, ideally that understand your world and the pressures you're under. And because doing this alone, like Michael said, it leads to burnout, and we're just not built or designed that way. And so absolutely, Jason, those add a lot of value.
Right. Everybody needs where it's like judgment-free zone, no, dual relationships, just someone that you can just unload. Like, let me tell you everything that's going wrong right now that's going on. And I just need you to listen and agree with me, and support me on letting all this out. But kidding aside, that stuff is becoming so important. And I've heard a lot of, mental health professionals say now, like, everyone should have a coach. And that's one of the things, going back to the AI conversation, I am hopeful about, is not for AI to replace human intervention. But what we know is we have a shortage of the number of mental health providers to be able to provide for the mental health needs of humans. And so if there's a way that technology can help bridge some of that, and if you need someone to talk to, something to talk to that can help coach you and guide you through those things, I think that's just going to become increasingly important for all of us, that we step into those human connections that we have. But then at times, if that's not possible, if technology can step in and help with some of that, that's going to be important too. What you shared, Michael, around this was analogous to something I used to see in schools. That was when I first started my work as a psychologist, was working in schools. And one of the things that fascinated me about it was, I always thought to myself, why do the principals, why can't they ever get to their actual work? It's like, well, once you're there in schools, you realize pretty quickly, they can't get to their work because of all the other fires that they're putting out. Like, literally, they're traveling from classroom to classroom, supporting the teachers, supporting the students, and they're not getting their actual work done unless they come in over the weekend. And it just seems like, this is kind of a crude analogy here, but it almost seems like that there's an extrapolation of that type of thing that's starting to happen more, I think, in the business world, is that the messier or more challenging things have gotten because of COVID, because of just a lot of the rapid change that's going on. Your people need you a lot more. Like, those soft skills, you're required a lot more to be stepping in and supporting those things, to be the counselor, to be the therapist, to be the support, to pour into the buckets of your other people.
Crisis management, PR.
Yes.
The list of things that get added on daily is, we need you to get in front of this.
Yep.
Right? And we need you to have a comment on that. Oh, and we need you to be a public face now, and social media, and we need to put you all over LinkedIn. I mean, again, there is a toll. There's one thing I'll disagree in that with Jason, was when he said, everybody needs somebody to listen and agree with them. And I learned a lot. There's actually a client of ours, the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, and he said he created his own personal board of advisors. It's on his person. It has nothing to do with business. as a husband and as a father. He's got somebody that he goes to for that. Everything a part of his life and his roles, and he kind of has this. And his thing that he says is, I want bad news to travel faster than good news. Like, because I'm facing so much right now, I'm going to miss things. And if all you want to do is pat me on the back, I'm not going to actually be there or do the things that are most important to me. So what he asks for is from his personal advisors, if you see something, I need bad news to travel faster than good news. I think as leaders, I think we have to ask that of ourselves. Is we want to tell, I mean, we're not always totally self-aware.
That's right.
We need to support and absolutely find people that will listen, that you can unload on. But somebody willing to also call you out and say, boy, I hear what you're saying, and I think you're seeing it wrong. I think you need to have a different perspective. And you know what I've also noticed is, right, I think that's how we get better. And we don't get in these echo chambers, because think of these leaders that are out there. They got a whole lot of people that would love to tell them and be the yes man. You're doing great. Keep going. You know, there's something in it for them. Bad news traveling faster, I think, is the better way of trying to help support. But you have to earn that right. You have to be invited in to do that with that.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you reiterated that, Michael. I didn't mean that, like, you got to have all yes people around you.
Yeah, sure.
But I think it is important to have one person, if you have a Switzerland from a therapeutic standpoint, to be like, look, all you're going to do is you're going to listen to me, and I'm going to unload, and you're not going to judge me, and you're just going to nod your head. You need one of those. But then, to your point, you got to have other people around you being like, let me tell you how it really is. I see some stuff from you, too. I think it just, to your point, like, you need that constellation of people around you to support, that kind of wear those different hats for you. The one that can be the supporter, the one that can be like, let me tell you some hard truths of some stuff going on. You need all those things, and all that's human connection. You can't eliminate those things. And it just gets back to your point of, like, the work that you do of not just finding and helping make the wise decisions of who that next executive is for your clients, but then also being with them on that journey of making sure they're assimilating into the community of where they're going to live, of checking in, of being with their family, of asking the questions that you know you'll get an honest answer to, that they may not share with their employer yet because they're brand new there. Gosh, it's just so important, the work that you're doing, and it's changing. And I'm just glad that we have leaders like you and companies like you in this space that aren't just rushing to the latest shiny new AI tool and saying, here we go, this is what we're going to do, but that you're being so thoughtful about it, and that you're doubling down on the importance of the human connection piece and thinking about the whole person and setting them up for success even beyond the point of hire. That just seems like it's going to be so much more important the more that we're inundated with technology and fast and quick decisions that often are done by technology. Scott, I see, looks like you got some things you want to share too as we get ready to wrap up.
No, I was just going to add, if there's any board members listening to this, if there's any CEOs, CHROs listening to this, on this topic we've been talking about, 40% of senior executives fell within the first 18 months.
Wow.
People spend so much energy and money and time in finding the right person and doing the search that it's like they show up on the first day and it's like, hands up, we're done, stress level low, we move on to the next thing. And I would just challenge and encourage, and if organizations want thoughts or ideas on this, like, how do you create a support plan? How do you create a 6, 12, 18-month onboarding and ramp-up plan to support that senior executive so they don't become one of the statistics, right? And I think this is probably one of the areas. I mean, we talked earlier about how we support families in a relocation. But this is one of the areas where even our matrix and we provide input into the onboarding plan, and it's really differentiated in a lot of the larger firms. We want to help boards and we want to help executive teams create plans, because let's face it, Jason, you know this, most organizations are really bad at onboarding plans, right? Like they're just really bad at helping talent scale up and get to execution and ramp up. I would say just as much attention and energy that you gave to the search, you should also give it to that person's first 6, 12, 18 months to make sure you set them up for success.
That's so good. And Michael, any closing thoughts from you as we get ready to wrap up?
No, one, I'll just say thank you, Jason, for having us on. We talk about our mission a lot, but we're here to serve people, whether that's in their business and solving the change of their business, or we're serving people's careers and the change of their career.
And what you're doing helps so many in both sides of this and understanding how to navigate this. We are living proof that change is constant, and we're going to have to remain adaptable to do that. And so I appreciate you creating an avenue that we can have these discussions and talk about how do we do that in a way that I think is productive, not just for ourselves, but for our businesses and for all those that are affected by our businesses. I think what you're doing, it's pretty critical, and your voice in this is really important. So thank you.
Mine is less important. I've got the easy job. I just sit back here and try to queue up some questions, and you guys just knocking grand slam after grand slam. That's the easy part. I've got the easy part here. But in all seriousness, though, yeah, thank you both for being here. It is critically important. Aside from a lot of the stats you shared, just the heart of leadership, of helping organizations find those next leaders with the silver tsunami coming. So many organizations are going through this to try and find that person who is the right fit to lead through change and support others and be all the things we talked about today is so important. So if you're listening and you got the tease today, you heard about the proprietary matrix that's used at Medallion Partners. You need to learn more. Reach out to them. You can go to Medallion Partners Inc. That's INC.com. Again, that's Medallion Partners Inc. INC.com. Reach out to them and schedule a time to learn more about what they do and how they can help you, because they really are experts in helping find your next right executive and leading your organization into the future. Michael and Scott, gents, thanks for being on. We'll have to do it again.
Thanks, Jason.
Appreciate you, Jason.
See you, fellas. Thank you. Thanks for tuning in to Working Forward. If you like what you hear, please hit the subscribe button wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Until next time, here's to building tomorrow today.